Howard Orton, I've lived here in Maryland for 6 years. I'm originally from Pennsylvania, and I've been married for 24 years, and I'm running because I believe it's time for a change in our country. We need to get things back on track. The budget's way out of hand and stuff right now.
Let's make him welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. I wasn't sure I was going to be able to make it. We were voting on the budget today. Had a 5-hour session in committee tonight voting, but I'm really glad that I was able to make it. My name is Nancy Jacobs. I am the mother of 3 grown daughters. My husband Bruce and I have been married 39 years, and we are soon going to be having our 8th grandchild, which I'm looking really, really forward to. I've been in the Maryland General Assembly for quite a few years now, first as a delegate and then as a senator. I was the minority whip, and then I was the minority leader in the Senate before stepping down to pursue this office. It's great to be here, and I want to thank you all for inviting us. Thank you.
All right. Hello, everybody. I'm Larry Smith. I'm very excited to be here because we are in one of the most important elections of our lifetime. And that's why I'm running, because I cannot sit by knowing what I know and not challenge the status quo. I'm an Army Lieutenant Colonel with children, and right now my children's future is definitely in jeopardy. We know how to fix this country, but we don't have the leadership in the right places to get through the sticky spots, if you will. I have seen things firsthand in Afghanistan, in the Pentagon, on Capitol Hill, in public policy class. I know what we need to do. I'm 20 years younger than Dutch Ubersberger. I have more intelligence qualifications than, in both sense of the word intelligence. Thank you very much. And I look forward to taking them on because the time is now and the person is me. Thank you.
My name is Raymond Bly. I guess I'm old. My name is Raymond Bly. I guess I'm old too. According to his standards. I'm a Vietnam veteran. I grew up in D.C., mostly homeless. I bought my first house in Jessup, Maryland, almost 40 years ago. I've been married 42 years now, with 3 children that all work in parts of high security parts of the government. I can't tell you where. But I'm getting more and more fed up with community associations not helping the community, but trying to control everybody that lives in the community's lives. And then the zoning board passing more and more zoning laws due to these community associations to take away our rights. And it goes all the way up to the federal government passing over 80,000 laws a year nationwide that keep telling us we can't do this, that, everything now. I'm a Christian. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Smith, the first question is you. You've heard about the bridge to nowhere. We call it pork barreling. What is your policy on pork barreling if elected?
I think that's probably a big part of what is wrong in Washington, the bridge to nowhere and other pork barrel projects. I haven't put in any bond bills this year for just that very reason. Every once in a while we will put in bond bills in Annapolis, but when times are tough, I don't think we should be doing that. I don't believe in building bridges to nowhere, and I don't believe in tolls over bridges either. I was the one that fought so hard about the tolls in Havre de Grace and the Bay Bridge and everywhere, and you know, I think we need to stand up for the people we represent, and standing up for the people we represent doesn't mean building bridges to nowhere.
I'd like to rebut. Senator Jacobs, maybe you can help me understand. Last year, the House of Delegates leader, Tony O'Donnell, tried to stop all earmarks in Annapolis. He led his delegation and convinced them not to accept any earmarks. Nobody in Washington accepted earmarks last year. And in spite of the fact that we're subsidizing the Baltimore Zoo to the tune of $5.1 million, can you explain why you secured a bond earmark for a giraffe house in Cecil County?
I would be glad to. We have a zoo in Cecil County called the Plumpton Zoo, and unfortunately it was closed down. It was a great educational area to take kids. It was like it was almost a petting zoo in many instances. Camps went there, schools went there, and it was an education. And when it closed down, it was extremely sad for the people of Cecil County and the children in the area. And they opened back up. The people spent hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars to buy the zoo. And they wanted to work with the Cecil County school system for educational purposes. They had a giraffe house that was falling down, and they wanted to build a new one to upgrade it, and it was $100,000, and it was putting back into the community because this was a private company, private individuals who were looking out for the people in Cecil County for education purposes. So yes, delegates and senators, we sponsored it, we voted for it, and we're very proud that we're furthering the education of school children in Cecil County.
Earmarks are one thing, but government spending is something else. When we spend $250 for a hammer you can get for $9.95 at Home Depot. We have to cut all the spending and the earmarks and start pricing stuff reasonably to our government and having the government buy it at a reasonable price instead of being ripped off all the time also.
Under what circumstances would you support military action against Iran?
Thanks for that question. For the last 12 years, I've had the highest security classifications that our country has, and so I'm intimately aware of the mess that our world is in and how each factor is related. We still have a presence around the world in direct relation to the weapons of mass destruction. We're in South Korea precisely because North Korea has nukes. We're still in Europe because the Soviet Union is not a civilized country yet that we can trust with nuclear weapons. We went to Iraq because we thought they had a nuclear program. If Iran gets nuclear weapons, we will have a permanent base in Kuwait and everywhere else, and this nightmare that is uncivilized international relations will continue. So we absolutely have to be clear that we've been in a proxy war with Iran since 1979, and it's been through other actors, and we have to do everything covert and overt to disallow that theocracy from bringing on the 12th imam with a great nuclear explosion over Israel. Thank you.
I don't want another war, even though we have to stop them from getting nuclear weapons. Our attack on bin Laden is what we should do in countries, not try to take them over and control them like we did in Iraq and Afghanistan, but send our special forces, our bombers in, and stop them from getting nukes, but not try to control them and take them over like we did in Iran, Afghanistan, Vietnam, etc., etc. Thank you.
Well, let me just rebut 20 seconds. Just real quick. The only land we've ever asked from a country that we went into was a place to bury our dead. All we're asking for is a civilized world. If we had not gone into some of these places, they would have come to us, and there would have been bomb residue spray machines, and there would have been invasive x-rays just to go to a Ravens game. So we have to look at all these things the way the world really is and not the way that we wish the world was.
With the gas prices jumping so high and the economy the way it is, what do you see as the #1 target for our energy for America?
I believe we need to drill more here and also take government transportation and hook them up with natural gas, as so many other vehicles have done, which would allow more oil for the other vehicles that are much smaller and more capable.
I don't know that I want to rebut, but I would like to add, in my younger life, when I was a kid, I grew up in West Virginia, and I don't believe that we are utilizing the coal that is available to us. And the Keystone Pipeline, we have so many resources here in this country that we don't need to be going elsewhere for them. But they're not opening up because the government, the liberals, won't allow it. And I believe that we need to use the resources that we have. We need to become independent of these countries. And I think what they're doing is wrong. I think what they're doing in Washington is wrong. They're driving this country further and further into debt by going overseas for oil, when we have those resources here in this country that we could be using.
Just like I talked about community associations, we have all these special interest groups that block any kind of drilling, exploration, or anything anywhere in America. So we have to start controlling these extremist groups that we have to protect a little bug or something. We can't drill, or we can't mine, we can't do this. We have to bring back America in a just fashion, but still protect the environment.
Since this is such an important question, I'll just add on. We need to understand that every time the price of gas goes up a penny, it adds a $1.25 billion pernicious tax on the entire economy. So if you do the math, when gas goes up $1.20, we lose 1 percentage point in GDP. And if it goes up 2.40, we lose 2, etc. So let's say we do have that Iranian war that maybe we can't get out of. So gas goes to $6. We're in an immediate recession because everything in our economy depends on oil or hydrocarbon-based fuels. So the part that the president lies to us about is just because oil is away doesn't mean that wind and sun are the next step. Wind and sun are way down the road. We don't need to legislate inefficiencies into our economy that's struggling enough already. We need leadership on the fact that nuclear waste is not as dangerous as we think it is. Nuclear is not a 4-letter word. We don't need to store our waste in a swimming pool in the back of Calvary Cliffs. It needs to go into some mountain 5 miles below the earth in toughened eggshells, and then forget about it. It won't hurt us. In 20 years, they won't be able to renew the 104 nuclear power plants in our country. It's called the nuclear cliff. And we will lose 20% of our power overnight because we don't have any leadership in Washington that says, you know what, you have to educate the public on nuclear power. Don't build it on the San Andreas Fault. But for God's sakes, build it. Thank you.
I'd like to read that. You say we don't use our coal in this country? That scares me. They're flattening mountains, taking out coal. There are mountains that, especially in West Virginia, that are flat, taking out coal. That's what we want in this country? No mountains? That's scary.
I think you're probably talking about strip mining in that instance.
Fine. And that's the coal industry.
Well, I'm from West Virginia, and I know that it's not just strip mining off the top of mountains. And I do know, too, that we can burn it more efficiently than we are. We need to explore that possibility, and we're just writing it off without looking into it. And I believe that we need to look into the resources that we have available to us and make them burn more efficiently, more cleanly. And as long as we write something off, as we're not even going to attempt to look at it, we're going to go down this downward spiral where we're depending on other countries to meet our needs when we could be meeting them ourselves.
Following up on the same issue, statistically, about 80% of United States petroleum needs are met by domestic sources. A recent Fed study found that speculation in petroleum markets played a significant role, I quote, in the rise in oil prices over the last 8 years. A Goldman Sachs study pegged the amount of financial impact of speculation on oil prices at least 50 to 60 cents per gallon. What role do you think market regulation should have in the addressing of rising petroleum prices? Well, whoever would like to start. I mean, the way it's been going, obviously we're working down the whole group, whoever wants to speak.
We should do something, but we live in a country of free enterprise. And the oil prices do go up, but they will come back down if, like, the strategic oil reserves is let go, that will kill the speculators, and they'll start losing money, and they won't do it again very quickly. Our market is based on ups and downs, supply and demand. Thank you.
The only time we want to release the strategic petroleum reserves is being that conflict with Iran we're talking about earlier. We don't want to touch them until we have a real emergency. Speculators have two sides. Somebody's betting it will go up, somebody else is betting it will go down. Until the government gets serious about the energy policy, people will bet that it will always go up. So we all know the answer to that is having a government that actually embraces North American energy. Then speculators will they'll go gamble in Vegas where they are more comfortable anyway. But one thing that has driven up gas prices about 60 to 80 cents is monetary easing by the Fed, where we, for most of last year, printed our own debt. We didn't sell as many bonds out of the $4 billion a day we were borrowing. And when we make the dollar cheaper, Saudi Arabia still gets theirs. So one of my 9th priorities is to audit the Fed to have a little more involvement on the idea that we want to kill our seniors' interest rates, kill the value of the dollar, and raise gas prices. It doesn't make any sense. So that's one thing I would look at.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that as well. Our government doesn't get it. Right now, when we are struggling to make ends meet, and the gas prices are going up and up and up, what do? We tax it more. And I'm afraid that so many of our politicians have never been outside working in private sector work. I know in Annapolis, we've got so many people down there who've never had their own business, and I'd say the same thing is true in Washington, who've never had to make ends meet. You know, I venture to say that Martin O'Malley probably hasn't bought a gallon of gas himself in 15 or 20 years. So why would we expect him to get it? He's been on the government dole that whole time. And I think we need to put elected officials in office who understand what it is to be a normal, average human being, not be brought up on government, looking to government to meet all of their needs, as what is going on right now in Annapolis.
Mentioning the fuel tax, I have several friends that are in the trucking business, and they said if it goes up 18 cents, they're going to fill up Pennsylvania, Delaware, and West Virginia, enough to drive all the way through the state and buy none, so the amount of revenue we're receiving will be going down, not up.
Take a question from the audience. Follow up, go ahead.
Actually, I have to say that with the exception of Mr. Bly, none of you actually answered my question with regard to the role of appropriate market regulation by the federal government. So I'd like you to follow up and ask you to address that directly, please.
I think it should fall under the umbrella of Securities and Exchange Commission and Commodities Trading Association, CFTC, and I think it already has. I think every time the shock goes up, they've looked into it. And yes, we live in a free market, and we do need futures pricing in order to organize your future contracts. So we're not going to get rid of futures, so people that don't own oil aren't going to buy it. Now you could look at if you can show what you just said, you could certainly say if you're going to buy one of this type of commodity, you have to have a place to store it. You maybe have a license that you actually show where your oil barrels are. So, and that would make it a real utility. So I appreciate your point. I don't want to destroy the free market, but that might be a step to take if we can show that it is accessible.
I certainly don't want to destroy the free market either, because when we do that, that's when we come into price regulations, that's when we get into trouble. I believe very strongly in the free market. I believe in competition. I believe that competition is good for the economy. It keeps prices lower, usually. But I don't want to go out and overregulate, as we so often tend to do, when we react to pressures. I believe in the free market. I believe that we need to stick with that. And I think we need to keep going the way that we should be going. Part of the problem with government is we want to regulate everything there is. And that's just wrong. And that's what we do. And I think a lot of the times when we do that, we're not thinking about what's best in the long run. We're thinking about what's happening now, and we're going to stop something. I think we need to let the free market be the free market, and we need to stop over-regulating.
I agree with that also, letting the free market work its way up, but if it can be proven that someone is purposely raising the price of the gallons, then it needs to be looked into and something needs to be done about it.
If you've listened to a lot of the discussion amongst the presidential candidates about some of the departments that executive agencies under the president who need to be either reduced or eliminated in terms of either budget or purpose. What are your feelings about departments of energy, departments of commerce, departments of education? And tell me, especially the environment. Tell me how you feel about what you would do with those folks in terms of what they're doing to this country and what they're spending. And you as a prospective congressman have a right to say something about what they do. And it's time something is done about who they are and what they're doing regulatorily.
Under the United States Constitution, our federal government's got its nose into everything, and a lot of those departments you mentioned should go back to the state and state only. It's no business of the government on commerce, on education. It's up to the local communities and the state to regulate that stuff, not the federal. I'm closer to a libertarian on that than a Republican.
I would agree with a lot of what you just said. I think probably what is wrong with a lot of what happens, especially with education, is that the orders are coming from the top down. I believe that I, as a parent, as a member of the PTA, as a member of the local community, know what is best for the kids, my kids, in our school system. I don't think the cookies cutter, one size fits all works. And when Washington gets involved in over-regulating what is going on with education and telling parents is one thing and mandating things that they think are important, I don't think they get it. We need to do the government that is closest to home. I don't think that we should be going that route. I think we should go with less regulation. I believe our local school boards know what's best, and they need to take that from the parents, not from higher up government authorities.
That school needs to be returned to the states, and also I believe school choice should be given to the parents. The president won't even send his children to the schools in D.C.
I would just add by saying I think that classifies as a softball question, because we all agree on the idea that we're under assault by an administration that is trying to use extra constitutional means to carry out their agenda. And whether they use it through an agency or whether they do it through executive orders or czars, it's not good. And that's one of the big reasons why all four of us are angry enough to run for Congress. And so, ditto, ditto, ditto.
Can I follow up just on one more thing about education? I think one thing that we need to realize as a nation, we're competing against an entire world. And we need to take more of STEM education, science, technology, we have a school in Harford County at Aberdeen High School that is an academy. They deal with these. STEM education is wonderful. It makes our students competitive with those students around the world. And I think we need to put more emphasis on things that work, on things that will keep us up to date and competitive with education around the world.
Man, this past week I was watching on television where Secretary of Defense Panella said that before we invaded any country we should get permission from the world. What say you?
He's done a couple things that offended me in the last week. Not only saying, I mean, one of the things that I strongly believe in is we need to have a league of democracies that's outside of the UN. The idea that Iran was briefly in charge of human rights in the UN is all you need to say about that. We need to get with the people who know how to live in a civilized country. And I don't mind asking France's opinion or Australia's opinion, but I'll be damned if I care what Syria thinks. And so, that's ridiculous. The idea that our soldier who cracked in his 4th tour, and after TBI, and obviously he's an Army sniper, and he goes out and he loses it, and he he lost. And so then the Secretary of Defense, the one man charged with knowing the stress of leaving your family, going to halfway around the world to do liberty's bidding, so that you might die, so that others may live. We should put our arm around him and give him the care he needs, and yes, separate him. But the idea that he said we're going to consider seeking the death penalty was, for me, as a soldier, the most offensive thing I think I've ever heard somebody who is part of the defense establishment say.
If it's a war that we need to get into, it should be an act of Congress, not like Vietnam, not like Iraq, etc. We need our representatives to say, yes, we agree. We don't need the UN, we don't need the world. And for the man that committed that near murder, I remember Vietnam. I'm a Vietnam combat vet. I served in Vietnam. I remember when they put that lieutenant in jail that was ordered to go in and just kill everybody in that city, and no higher ups got charged. We put it on the backs when you come home sick from a war, like the first Desert Storm war. The military ignores you, just tells you goodbye. They don't treat you for PTSD. They don't really help our veterans cope with this stuff. Even though that guy had brain injury, they sent him right back to Afghanistan.
Switching gears, you talked a lot already about fuel prices, the impact it's had on the economy. Another great impact on the economy has obviously been the cost of health care. There's been the controversies involving the Obamacare, quote unquote. If elected, what do you believe is the answer to contain health care costs and also try to expand coverage to those who need them? Senator Jacobs, I guess.
Well, one of the first things that I would hope to do when I get to Congress is to repeal Obamacare. That means I think we need to also look into portability is extremely important. The portability of health insurance plans across state lines through the promotion of interstate health insurance programs. We need to be able to carry it across borders. I believe ultimately the competition improves quality, promotes innovation, and reduces the cost. I don't believe that the government should be forcing. I believe it's unconstitutional for the government to force a product on a country. It is unconstitutional. And we should not put up with it. I also believe very strongly in tort reform. I think we need to look at these costs that we're paying out. And that is something that the O'Malley administration and federally we haven't done enough of. We've got to look at that. And I don't think the bureaucrats should be in the examination rooms with our doctors. We don't know what is best. We really don't. And I think we need to work together to come up with answers, and I believe we can, but I don't believe the answers should always come from the government.
The first person I remember wanting national health care was Richard Nixon, a Republican. My wife's Vietnamese. Her two elderly sisters that have a lot of medical problems come to America, and I've taken to the doctors here and they can't stand it. Vietnam has national health care. I don't know how it works, but they go to a doctor on every corner, they test anything they need. It's not regulated what they need and what they can get and what they can't. If we got rid of all of the profit insurance companies for Medicare and had one provider nationally with not all these regulations like Medicare is starting to do, we won't cover this, we won't cover that, but we will cover it as long as it's a legal procedure or something. I think we'd be better off and it'd be a lot cheaper and we'd get a lot better service as a national health provider, but not Obamacare.
So you've pressed upon really the greatest challenge going forward, which is the fact that our spiraling healthcare costs are unaffordable, especially for the 77 million retirees that we have coming, that have already started coming. It's a conversation. Obamacare is not it, but the replace legislation never happened. I was on Capitol Hill when we voted for repeal and replace, and the replace part kind of disappeared. I will go to Capitol Hill and lead on replacing Obamacare with things that help. And one of the things that would help is interstate interstate competition for health insurance. And how do you do that? I'll tell you how to do that. When you have interstate competition, you actually have to have a federal role because they have to have some place to redress their grievances. So you take the exchanges, and you don't have minimum requirements. You don't get rid of mini meds. You don't say the Catholic Church. You have whatever the free market wants to offer, but you put it on one internet spot, and you put it just like a Travelocity website. So people say, oh, I want this. I've never had cancer my whole life. I can do a catastrophic policy on cancer. Somebody else who's had a lot, maybe they'll do it differently. And you get the smorgasbord. Right away, Blue Cross Blue Shield prices go down 8% because their name brand doesn't matter on that website. And you use that exchange system to set up premium support payments for Medicare because we don't have enough workers to pay for the 77 million retirees. And so we're going to have to be able to have consumer-based selection of healthcare policies. And so it's complicated, and you need somebody in Congress who understands the sustained growth rate, the minimum loss ratio. I don't want to bring up classes, but that's the one class I got an A in recently. It was health policy. And it's not easy to get an A straight, an A minus, and an A, because I knew this stuff matters. And I look forward to going into the conference with Paul Ryan and with Democrats and having the adult conversation on health care that President Obama didn't allow us to have.
I just wanted to follow up. I just thought of something else. About 7 years ago, my husband had surgery for cancer. And you wouldn't believe the number of the people on the floor at Johns Hopkins where he was who were not from America. They were from other countries. They were from Canada. They were from other countries that did not have the kind of healthcare system that we enjoy here in this country. We need to keep it that way. We have some friends who live in Canada. She hurt her back. She needed immediate surgery. They arranged for her to have surgery 6 months later. And she was in agony the whole time. And they could not afford to come to this country. And so I think we do have the best in the world. But I think we need to keep it the best in the world. And keeping it the best in the world is not caving in to one-size-fits-all, Obamacare, overregulated. I don't want death panels. You know, my father had quadruple bypass surgery at the age of 88. Would Obama have allowed that?
No.
Of course not. Of course not. Nobody should be dictating those things to the American people. Thank you.
I also have to agree that we need to appeal Obamacare and open up insurances across all the states.
Does anyone have anything specific on their agenda for our environment, especially in terms of the Chesapeake Bay?
I go fishing, well, I used to go fishing every night, 7 nights a week during fishing season, and crab too, until my wife got small cell lung cancer a year and a half ago, and I'm in chemo and radiation with her now. But we need to protect our water, we need to protect our environment, but I think local communities have the best educated reasoning to do it. The federal government don't live here. We need to get the federal government out of our lives concerning a lot of this stuff and let the local communities handle it.
Throughout history, everybody's for a clean environment. So the idea that you can go too far and say we just want to have our stuff and live in an awful place like China, how their environment is ridiculous. So the question is how you get there. And what they've shown is you get there by having collaborative regulation, where you get in there as a partner and you come up with solutions for the companies that need to control their emissions. With regards, you don't do gotcha compliance and over fining because you don't get cooperation that way. With regards to the Chesapeake Bay, that's a big part of the 2nd District. You all know the #1 source of nitrogen from the Chesapeake Bay is? Do you think it's from runoff? No, it's not from that. It's from sewer systems overflowing during heavy rains. They dump millions of gallons of sewage into our Chesapeake Bay. And there's no leadership, no overall plan to say, look, every 100 years you gotta check out your sewer system. And so, start that and have some penalties and say Philadelphia, Baltimore, Washington, D.C. It may not be tomorrow, but you have to show me the plan where you're going to constantly update your sewer system. And then secondly, runoff is an issue, but you can control that with incentives for people to get soil tests. If you went to ChemLawn and a soil test, if you did a $5 soil test and you got 30% off your bill, you do a soil test. A lot of people don't realize they don't need potassium. We got plenty of potassium. But they get potassium because they get 10, 10, 10, let's just throw it all on the lawn. And when the lawn doesn't use it, it deposits in Chesapeake Bay. So those two things alone, with all these issues, there is a solution. And then the next step is educating the public, withstanding the withering demagoguery and scare tactics you'll get, still standing there like Ben Franklin stood there when he went before Parliament in England, and then calmly responding, and you're still there, just like the flag of Fort McHenry, and you actually fix things. And that's what I'm going to go to Washington to do.
I think there's a balance that needs to be met. And I think we don't often meet that balance. What we're talking about tonight reminds me of something, a discussion that we've had in Annapolis the last couple of weeks with our chicken farmers. There's a family on the Eastern Shore who somebody flew over their property and saw what they thought was a pile of chicken manure that was just running off into the water. Did they check before they did lawsuits against these people? No. It was sewage sludge that was legal that they were putting on their crops. And you know what? Right now, the University of Maryland's law school is suing this family. They have 8 law students actively suing, spending your money to sue these poor chicken farmers who did nothing wrong. Even Governor O'Malley wrote a letter saying that it was wrong, what they were doing. And they didn't listen. They're still doing it. I mean, I don't let that law school into my office without telling them exactly what I think of what they're doing. People can get wacko over anything. And unfortunately, we have people who are wacko on both sides of the issue. But right now, we need to be good stewards, and we need to take a well-balanced approach. And we don't see that happening all the time. My husband is what you call a certified industrial hygienist. Indoor air quality. We have a bill in Annapolis right now that is going to totally overregulate, and it's already very well regulated, the removal of asbestos. It is well regulated right now. We don't need to develop a new fund. We don't need to develop a new system. They're already regulated. You already have to be trained. In many cases, you have to have a professional there watching over worker safety. We don't need to go overboard. But unfortunately, in many instances, we do go overboard, and we do overregulate. And I think we need to take a better balanced approach when we're dealing with these issues. And I don't think we often do that.
Mr. Bly, following up on your remarks about the EPA and your apparent advocacy for devolving the authority to regulate environmental matters to the states and localities. Just this week, the local sour dump was listed on the EPA super site. Given that that's a site that was polluted by an owner who's been out of the picture for 30 years and we have no recourse against that prior owner, doesn't it seem natural that some government authority is going to have to step in to do that? And do you believe that the state or a locality would have the resources to do the kind of job that the EPA hopes to do?
The federal government could help the state fund the project, but the state should be in control of the project. And with the EPA, with the state EPA now, we regulate the new businesses that they cannot pollute like the old ones did in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s when we had the Industrial Revolution. We were regulating a lot more statewide, and we need to get the federal government out, except for returning a lot of our tax money back to us to take care of sites like that, like the ballpark up in Baltimore City that they found lead and other pollutants in. They should help fund it, but not regulate it. The state should be the one that handles it, because each state has its own unique problems with pollution and stuff.
Just real quick, if I could, I think that the federal government plays an important role, because the primary source of our air pollution in this state is from Ohio and the Midwest. And when you look at the Army Corps of Engineers, they're not set up by state, they're set up by watershed basin. I mean, the environment, the real world transcends state lines. So come on, we need leadership, we need a partnership, we need cooperation, but we need everybody at the table with solutions and a good faith effort.
You know, right now in this state, we have over 19 toxic waste sites. Superfund. In Cecil County, we have Bainbridge, the old Bainbridge Naval Station. And they left it, and it's not clean. And we need to hold them responsible. I believe that a lot of the sites that we have problems with in this state and in this country are former Army, Naval, and we need to go back to them, and they need to partner in the cleanup. It's not enough to give it over to a community and say, do whatever you want with it. They need to partner for cleanup, and they're not doing that. And I think that there's cases like this one with the 2.5 acres. We should do whatever we can. I mean, I know you said that their owners are no longer around. Brownsfield legislation, we've tried in the past with Brownsfield legislation to allow somebody to come in and clean it up, and at a very reduced price for the property. There are ways that we can tackle this, but I think that people have to be held accountable who have done this. And I don't think we're attempting hard enough to hold those people accountable.
Along with partnering to clean it up, they also need to set a time frame. We're going to get this done within 5 years, not wait another 30 to the other people who have also passed away that committed this affair.